He looked me in the eye and said, "You're making people uncomfortable." And just like that, I knew I was getting close. I'd only been working at Veritas Labs for 5 weeks, but something had felt off from the first day. The company looked clean, sleek glass walls, curated diversity, smiling teams. They called themselves the future of secure AI infrastructure. They had defense contracts, startup awards, press photos of the CEO shaking hands with senators, but the numbers didn't add up. I was hired as an operations analyst, entry-level, quiet job, no spotlight, and that suited me fine. I liked watching, tracking, catching what others missed. The job was supposed to be simple, review process reports and flag inefficiencies. But the deeper I dug, the more I found patterns that didn't make sense. Employee IDs attached to projects after they'd left the company, security audits signed by non-existent firms, and a pattern of meetings happening late at night, never scheduled, always undocumented. When I asked my direct supervisor about one project timeline, she brushed it off. "Oh, that's just how we report innovation cycles." When I asked HR about a terminated employee who still had active access credentials, they said, "Sometimes it takes a while for the system to catch up." And then came Damian Rourke, my new department head. Perfectly tailored suits, razor sharp, smiles. The kind of boss who loved talking about team alignment and protecting our intellectual ecosystem. The first time we met, he complimented my resume and said I had just the right energy. The second time, he asked why I was spending so much time in archived logs. The third time, he called me into a meeting room, closed the door, and said, "You're too curious." I sat straight. I thought asking questions was part of the job. He tilted his head slightly, smiled without warmth. Within reason. The next day, I started recording everything. It wasn't paranoia. It was protection. Something in his tone told me the truth wasn't welcome here, and I wasn't going to end up another ghost in their system. Every one-on-one I hit record. Every late-night Slack call, I copied. Every spreadsheet I reviewed, I screen captured and saved to a private, offline folder. At first, I told myself I was overthinking, that maybe Veritas was just messy. Maybe their innovation pace really did move faster than policy. But then I found the audio logs. Buried in a forgotten corner of a shared drive, there was a folder mislabeled as Onboarding Docs Q2. Inside were 8 files. All voice, memos. Most were ambient meetings, but one, just one, caught my attention. Damian's voice, crisp and clear, saying, "If anyone outside ever sees those tests, we're done. So bury the trial version, rename the output, and delete the staging." Logs. I played it again, then again, and my blood ran cold. Veritas wasn't a startup with growing pains. It was a lie. And now that I had proof, I couldn't just walk away. I had to bring the whole thing down. I played the recording over and over. Not because I needed to believe it was real, but because I needed to remind myself what kind of man I was dealing with. Damian Rourke didn't make mistakes. He made decisions. Cold, calculated, and precise. He wasn't the kind of boss who snapped under pressure. He was the kind who weaponized calm to disarm the people trying to catch up. Every word he spoke felt rehearsed. Every compliment came with an expiration date. And now I had a recording of him confirming something that could rip Veritas Labs apart. But I couldn't move too fast. Whistleblowers don't survive in this industry by being impulsive. They survive by being invisible until the exact moment they choose not to be. So, I dug deeper. I started with the old trial reports. Most employees didn't bother with them. They were buried in cloud folders, half-archived and mislabeled. But I found inconsistencies in the metadata. Timestamps showed edits after the tests had supposedly been finalized. The datasets didn't match the outcomes. I pulled them side by side and found that key failure results had been replaced with boilerplate pass entries, copied from a previous year's successful run, and it wasn't a one-off. It was systematic, a cover-up embedded in the company's development cycle. But that wasn't the worst part. What chilled me most were the names. One test series, labeled VI Beta Pre-Launch, had 3 engineer approvals at the bottom. I recognized 2 names, but the third, Thomas Cairn. I'd seen his name before, on a Slack channel, in archived messages, even on a few shared notes from older dev meetings. So I checked the employee registry. No entry. I checked the badge access, logs. No scans in over 6 months. So I asked around casually, "Hey, do you know if Thomas is in R&D or infrastructure?" Blank stares. Thomas. Who? The name didn't even ring a bell to most of the team, so I searched deeper. And that's when I found the HR file terminated 8 months ago. No exit record. No public announcement. No internal farewell email. But somehow, his digital fingerprint still signed off on new builds. A ghost engineer. Someone was using his profile to approve unreleased code that was never tested beyond simulation. It was fraud, it was dangerous, and it was live. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen, feeling my pulse hammer behind my ears. Then I looked across the floor at Damien's office. He was smiling. Laughing with a visiting investor. I opened my recorder, hit record, and whispered into the mic. Proof of falsified system validation. Thomas Cairn's ghost signature still active. I saved the file, encrypted it, and uploaded it to my private off-cloud server. Then I made a decision. No more waiting. It was time to start setting the fire. The next morning, I went back into the internal archive and started cataloging everything. Voice, notes, screenshots, change logs, approval forms, flagged Slack messages. I worked like a surgeon, precise and silent. No one noticed, except Damien. Later that afternoon, he called me into his office again. Same fake smile, same precision. "Jessa," he said, "you've been spending a lot of time reviewing legacy documents." "I just want to understand the system architecture more deeply," I said with a straight face. He chuckled. "That's admirable, but it's making people nervous. People are starting to ask why you're revisiting old files." I tilted my head. "Shouldn't they be glad someone's double-checking security?" He paused for just a beat too long. Then he smiled again. "Curiosity is valuable, until it's not." I nodded and stood up. "I'll be more mindful." But as I walked out of his office, I whispered under my breath, "You're not afraid of curiosity. You're afraid of exposure." And I already had enough to give him a reason to be. By now, I didn't just have suspicions. I had a case, falsified test results, ghost employees, timestamp tampering. But cases don't mean much if no one listens. And in a company like Veritas, labs, truth was the first thing buried and the last thing allowed to breathe. I needed more. Something undeniable. Something even Damien Rourke couldn't lawyer his way around. So I went hunting through the one place no one bothered to clean thoroughly. Old meeting logs saved from Veritas's deprecated video conferencing system. Most of the files were dull. Weekly updates, design stand-ups, team check-ins. I skimmed through hundreds of them in the privacy of my apartment. Then I found a session labeled Int Liaison, Corp Call, Private, Rourke, Undisclosed 4. 11 no-invite history, no agenda, but it was saved in the wrong folder. I played it. Damien's voice. Calm, cold. "If we can't validate by May, we fake it. I don't care what the engineers say. You want funding or you want questions." The second voice, unfamiliar, older, measured, possibly legal counsel. "There's a risk. Whistleblower clauses are tightening. If it gets out that the validation was tampered with," Damien cut him off. "Then we bury the logs, restructure. the file names, and swapped the API shell with the one from Luxon's vault. We bought their IP for a reason. I paused the recording. Luxon. A startup that went bankrupt 2 years ago. Their AI framework was experimental, open-sourced and never patented. They'd gone under after a data breach left their system gutted. And now Veritas had their code, which meant they didn't build the system they were selling. They stole it, masked it, and repackaged it as their own revolutionary AI infrastructure. And Damien just said it, on a recorded call. I stared at the screen, pulse ringing in my ears. He wasn't afraid of a few questions. He was afraid that the entire foundation of Veritas was rotten, and I'd just found the leak. That night, I encrypted the recording, labeled it Proof 1 Rourke Theft Call, and uploaded it to a vault with timed off-site syncing. Then I backed it up in 3 places. Then I ran. Not literally, but I packed a go bag. Burner phone, USB, cash. I knew I was being watched. Maybe not every second, but Damien wasn't the type to wait until a problem solved itself. He would erase me before I could reach the surface, and he'd already started. The next morning, my access to internal reports was revoked. My work email froze. My badge scanned red at the front door. At 10:11 a.m., I received a calendar invite, HR final meeting. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I arrived at the office anyway, sat quietly in the conference room while the HR rep slid a printed termination letter across the table. Damien wasn't there. He didn't need to be. This isn't a disciplinary issue, the woman said flatly. It's just not a good culture fit. I signed nothing. I took nothing. And as I left the building, I smiled. They had no idea what was coming. That night, I opened a new account on an anonymous forum used by security, researchers and tech journalists. I uploaded a short clip from the Luxon call, just 1 sentence from Damien. We faked the validation, used the Luxon framework, pushed the launch. I labeled it, How much is your AI integrity worth? It took 5 hours to spread, but when it did, it detonated. By morning, every major tech reporter had seen it. The company's subreddit exploded. Former employees chimed in. A few anonymously confirmed what I already knew. There were others who'd left quietly, pushed out for knowing too much. The clip had no timestamp, no context, but it was Damien's voice. No AI tool could fabricate that specific cadence. Veritas issued a vague denial. Audio manipulated. False claims. Internal investigation underway. But the fire had started, and I was just getting warm. I didn't sleep for the next 2 nights, not because I was afraid, though fear hovered constantly, but because I was calculating. The story wasn't just about Damien anymore. It was about a company that had built itself on deception, silence, and intimidation. And I was holding the match. The short audio clip had cracked open the first layer. But people still needed proof. People needed blood. They needed to hear what I heard, see what I had seen. The real recording, the full version, the one with names, timelines, and a roadmap of exactly how they built a billion-dollar product from lies. I had it. I just needed to survive long enough to use it. I contacted Reed & Sloan, a legal firm specializing in whistleblower protection. Not the ones that took out billboards or made TV ads, but the kind that corporate boards muttered about behind closed doors. They didn't promise safety. They promised strategy, power. Within hours, I was assigned an encrypted file path, a burner number, and a handler named Delia, who spoke calmly and precisely. "You hold a live grenade," she said after reviewing my encrypted submission. "But you're not alone anymore. Let's aim it." Delia's plan was simple. Hold the full recording. Let the viral clip stir the waters, then release the full package during Veritas's most vulnerable public moment. Their upcoming product integrity. Gala. A formal event. streamed live, backed by 3 government tech agencies and a swarm of venture capitalists. The company's leadership, including Damien, would be front and center, speaking about transparency, innovation, and earned trust. And I was going to hijack it. The setup was elegant. Maya, an ex-Veritas engineer who'd seen the same corruption before being quietly pushed out, helped me build a lightweight transmitter hidden in a phone case. It allowed a timed audio file to be broadcast over any synced speaker system with Bluetooth or Wi-Fi exposure. All I had to do was get in, trigger the signal, and let Damien confess to his own destruction. I secured a fake press credential through a trusted connection. The name: Lena Harmon, freelance journalist with a known startup blog. The photo was me, but different enough. A wig. Darker makeup. Glasses. Enough to pass for someone tech-hip, but unmemorable. The gala was being hosted in a sleek venue in Lower Manhattan. Security was tight, but not for press. Everyone was too focused on cameras and seating charts. I walked through without a blink. Inside, sleek lighting, soft music, expensive suits pretending to be disruptive visionaries. I kept my eyes low and my hands still. My phone was pre-synced. The moment Damien stepped on stage, I'd tap once. 60 seconds later, his voice would speak. Not the version polished for investors, but the one captured in a private, illegal meeting. The one where he said, "We fake the validation, use the Luxon framework, push the launch." And more, much more. Backstage, I waited. The press was herded into a side corridor near the media booth. The MC announced Damien's name. The room clapped. He walked onto the stage, sharp as ever, blue suit, silver tie, the kind of smile that belonged to a man who thought he'd survived the worst. He leaned into the mic. "Tonight, we celebrate progress, fueled by trust, powered by truth." I tapped the back of my phone. Nothing happened. At first, then came the feedback, a soft pop, a pause, and then his voice, the real one. "We fake the validation, use the Luxon framework." Heads turned. "I don't care if it's tested. We need investors, not audits." Damien froze mid-sentence. "Make it look secure. We'll fix it after launch. Just get the money first." Silence. Then chaos. People stood. Phones went up. Someone shouted, "Is that real?" A VC executive pushed his chair back and stormed out. Damien reached for his mic again. But the sound was hijacked. I turned, walked calmly toward the exit. No one noticed me. They only saw the man on stage, his empire cracking live in front of everyone. For the first time, Damien Rourke didn't have the room in the palm of his hand. He stood on stage, blinking at the crowd, as his own voice echoed from the speakers. His polished posture faltered. His hand trembled near the mic. And across the room, you could feel it. The shift. That collective realization from everyone watching that something wasn't right. That maybe the golden man in the blue suit was built on rot. Phones were up. Cameras were recording. No one looked away. Security scrambled toward the control booth, barking into earpieces, but they were too late. The voice continued. "Rename the files. We'll fake the code trail. Nobody reads line-by-line audits anymore." The journalists in the front row stood one by one. Notebooks closed. Press badges flashed. Every second of the leak being recorded, live-streamed, clipped, shared. Damien looked into the spotlight like it might blind everything away. But the lights didn't protect him anymore. I stepped outside as the murmurs turned to shouting. I didn't. Run. I didn't need to. The damage had already been done. Outside, the air felt different. Heavy, but clean. I slid into a black rideshare with tinted windows where Maya was already waiting. She handed me a bottle of water without a word. We listened in silence as the car pulled away from the venue. On Maya's phone, a Reddit thread had already hit trending. CEO of Veritas gets exposed on his own stage. What's next? I didn't smile. Not yet. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Clips of the audio on TikTok, with subtitles, tech sites dissecting the phrases, analysts explaining what it meant that Veritas had stolen its foundational code from Luxon and misrepresented it to the government. A congressional tech advisor tweeted, "If this is accurate, Veritas committed serious federal violations." And then came the email. Not to me, but to every Veritas employee, past and present. Subject: Internal audit suspension. Executive team under federal review. The board had launched an emergency investigation. Contracts were frozen. Product deployment halted. The IPO filing pulled back. The press team issued a shaky statement calling the audio deeply misleading and taken out of context. But the context? That came next, because Delia, my legal handler, had released the full recording, unedited, time-stamped, verified, by independent experts, and accompanied by a full report outlining everything I had found, everything Damien had said, and every violation they tried to hide. There was no spin big enough to contain it. Damien disappeared. Within 24 hours, he was no longer at Veritas, his office cleaned out, his access revoked. Rumors flew. He'd fled the city. He'd lawyered up. He was negotiating immunity. No one could confirm. But I knew one thing. He was running scared. Because the man who once mocked my curiosity now knew exactly what it had uncovered. I stayed underground, but not silent. Delia handled the statements. Maya coordinated with a security group that ensured my name stayed out of headlines, for now. But I watched from the shadows. The people who once looked through me were now combing every line of code, every financial disclosure, every team chat, for something, anything, that might help them survive the storm. I knew better. There was no surviving this. Not for them. The first time someone said my name publicly, it wasn't in a threat. It was in gratitude. A journalist on a live panel held up a printout of the leaked files and said, "This woman risked everything. Without her, we'd still be calling Damien Rourke a visionary. Now we know he was something else entirely." And just like that, I wasn't just a whisper in the background anymore. I was the reason Veritas Labs collapsed. The days that followed were a storm. The Department of Justice opened a formal investigation. Damien was subpoenaed, publicly. His face, once on startup magazine covers and VC podcasts, now filled news feeds with a new title, Disgraced Tech Executive Under Federal Scrutiny. More employees came forward. Some with stories, some with evidence. It was like the silence had cracked, and the flood wouldn't stop, and at the center of it was me. The girl who asked too many questions. The girl who recorded everything. Delia told me I had two options. Stay protected. Let the legal case speak for me. Step forward. Own the story. Face the noise. I thought about it. For weeks, I thought about it, and then I stood in front of a crowd of journalists, holding the microphone, wearing a blazer that still smelled faintly, like fear, and said the words that had lived in my throat since the day Damien fired me. I was let go for asking questions, was silenced for seeking clarity, and I was labeled a liability because I noticed what they were afraid someone might see. But I wasn't the problem. The problem was a company that built its success on deception and expected no one to notice. Noticed, and I refused to stay quiet. The video of that moment went viral. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just wanted to set the record straight. But in doing so, something changed. Other people, women, analysts, assistants, engineers, started sending me their stories, their recordings, their notes and secrets. As if they'd just been waiting for someone to prove it was possible to fight back and survive. So I did something I never thought I would. I built something of my own. The Archive Project. a digital repository for corporate abuse, ethical violations, whistleblower stories, built on encrypted, decentralized tech, anonymous, protected, permanent. We launched quietly, no branding, just a page that said, "They said you asked too many questions." We say, "Ask louder." Within a week, we had over 200 submissions. By month 2, over 1,000 Veritas Labs gone. Its assets were seized. The brand dissolved. Investors jumped ship. The building was sold off, stripped of logos and luster. And Damien? He was indicted. Wire fraud, federal contract deception, obstruction of justice. Multiple counts. He pled not guilty. But his trial wouldn't be quiet, because the prosecution had something he never expected. My recordings, unedited, unapologetic, his own voice testifying against him. 1 year later, I stood in front of a new audience, a university lecture hall, packed with students in ethics and technology. I told them the truth, not just what happened, but how easy it is to make it happen again. How silence is always the first demand of power. I ended the talk with the quote that followed me since that first day in Damien's office. "You're making people uncomfortable." Then I looked at the students and smiled. Make them uncomfortable. That's how you know you're asking the right questions.